Good morning, everyone. We'll just give it a couple minutes to let more folks join on. But if you are press, we would like you to change in your name, uh, writing out press and the outlet to your name. Um, and then we do have questions to send to. So if you have questions, you can send it to the questions person, but we'll give it a couple minutes before we start. Okay. Can you go back to the first slide? Cool. So, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining our press conference today. We are hosting as the International Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines, Kabataan Alliance, Malaya Movement USA, and the Philippine Human Rights Act Coalition. My name is Shar. I'm part of the Kabataan Alliance National Executive Board and member of the Philippine Human Rights Coalition Steering Committee. And I will be one of your MCs, and I'll pass it to Troy.
Hey everyone, good morning. Thank you for being here with us. My name is Troy. I'm here with the People's Lawyers of the Philippines, based out of Washington, and we'll also be here to co-MC today. Um, as as we all trickle in again, we're here to raise the call for an independent investigation into the Taboso killings, and uplift the congressional letter written by Congresswoman Jayapal, and signed by 10 additional members of Congress. Um, just a little bit for context setting. As many folks know, on April 19th, 2026, the 79th Infantry Battalion, 3rd Infantry Division of the Philippine Army shot and killed 19 people in Taboso, whom the Army has claimed were all combatants. Since then, initial reports have indicated that up to 9 of those killed were civilians, including our own community members, Sorem and Lyle Prijoles. So today we'll highlight excerpts from Congresswoman Jayapal's letter. We'll hear testimony from the families of Kai and Lyle, who continue to call for justice for their loved ones and all of the Negros 19, as well as hear statements of support from congressional representatives, human rights institutions, and those impacted by political repression in the Philippines. In sharing these testimonies, we'll highlight how the struggle for land and the extreme exploitation of peasants and farmers and Negros are the root causes of the Philippine government's repression. Um, just to go to the letter a little bit, as Congresswoman Jayapal wrote, the Toboso killings appear to be a part of a larger crackdown of the Philippine government, targeting activists and members of progressive civil society organizations, or CSOs. Philippine counterterrorism laws, including the Anti-Terrorism Act and Terrorism Financing Act, are used to prosecute and imprison individuals from CSOs engaged in human rights advocacy, environmental protection, and humanitarian and developmental work. After that, our speakers will be taking questions. Please use the Zoom chat and message the person labeled questions to submit your questions, and we'll address as many of them as possible at the end. And then to wrap everything up, we'll share calls to action and next steps. And yes, this is our program flow. But with that, I'll turn it over to Shar to kick us off.
Yeah, thank you. So again, U.S. Congressional Representative Pramila Jayapal from Washington State has been an ongoing advocate for human rights in the Philippines. When the Philippine Human Rights Act was introduced by former Congresswoman Susan Wild, Jayapal, without fail, continued to co-sponsor the legislation. Her office regularly met with the Washington PHRA Coalition for updates on issues Filipinos are concerned about in the Philippines and the U.S. So we are so thankful that Representative Jayapal for her ongoing support and concerns for the Filipino community, including advocating for Filipinos in detention. The congressional letter is addressed to Philippine Ambassador Jose Manuel Romualdez and calls for an independent, impartial, and credible investigation into the Philippine Army's April 19 counterinsurgency operation in Toboso Negros Occidental. So we'll show some of the excerpts from that letter and yeah. So to start, it reads, while the Philippines Commission on Human Rights is currently investigating the incident, we are deeply concerned that the Commission's efforts have been hobbled by a lack of cooperation from security forces and their systematic barriers. We urge the government of the Philippines to ensure the Commission's investigation is thorough and impartial, includes the full cooperation of the Army in providing access to evidence, and allows participation of independent civil society actors to secure an objective report that accurately reflects the facts surrounding the incident. Next slide. So, Miss Sorem, a 26-year-old resident of Seattle, committed to advancing the interests of the most marginalized Filipinos, had traveled to Negros in the Philippines earlier this year to learn about and document the conditions of the rural Filipino communities, according to family, friends, and colleagues. Mr. Prijoles, a resident of Hayward, California, was a human rights activist and advocate for underserved and rural Filipino communities, including farm workers. According to eyewitness accounts from local residents, Ms. Soram, Mr. Prijoles, and their four companions were civilized civilians and never carried firearms. Among these civilians were journalist R.J. Nicole Ledesma, a coordinator for Altermedia Network, a group of local news outlets covering news issues affecting conflict-affected rural communities, as well as two land rights activists and a university student. In addition to the six individuals identified as civilians by witnesses interviewed by civil society fact-finding mission, other credible reports indicate that three additional victims, including two minors, were also civilians and residents of the locality. These accounts underscore the need for an independent, impartial investigation into the deaths to assess whether crimes or gross violations of human rights or humanitarian law occurred. However, we are gravely concerned that the Commission on Human Rights is hampered by systematic issues that preclude it from conducting an independent, effective investigation. We are deeply concerned that with such fundamental barriers to the independent investigation, the result of the Commission's investigation may absolve security forces of wrongdoing, notwithstanding the facts surrounding the incidents. We urge the government of the Philippines to ensure an independent, impartial, and credible investigation into these killings. And so, in this letter that Jayapal has written, um, it was signed on by U.S. Representatives Maxine Dexter from Oregon, Troy Garcia and Delia C. Ramirez from Illinois, James P. McGovern from Massachusetts, Kwasi Mafume and Johnny O. from Maryland, and Rashida Talib from Michigan, along with U.S. Senators Jeffrey Merkley from Oregon, Adam Smith from California, and Chris Van Hollen from Maryland.
All right. Thank you, Shar. And thank you again to Congresswoman Jayapal for being a champion supporter of the Philippines. So next, we have a submitted statement from Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland, one of the signatories. Last month, Senator Van Hollen met with attorneys from the National Union of People's Lawyers, who we'll hear from today later in the program. And his office has supported previous efforts to uphold human rights in foreign policy with the Philippines. So today, reading his statement is one of his constituents, Gordon from iChirp U.S.
Hello. This is Senator Van Hollen's statement. Good morning. I'd like to thank the International Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines for bringing everyone together today. And I'd especially like to thank the families of Sorem and Lyle Prijoles. I am grateful for your courage in speaking out, and I stand with you in your pursuit of truth, justice, and accountability. Kai and Lyle were among 19 people killed in Toboso earlier this year, and their deaths raise serious questions that must be fully and independently investigated. That is why I join Representative Pramila Jayapal and my colleagues in calling on the Philippine government to ensure an independent, impartial, and credible investigation is conducted. You deserve answers, and those responsible must be held accountable. We must ensure that human rights advocates can carry out their work without fear of violence. And I will continue to press for answers and justice for Kai, Lyle, and all those killed.
Yeah, thank you so much, Gordon, for reading his statement, and really hearing the support that we have. Really grateful to see how many of the um, different legislators support Jayapal's letter to really project our concerns and our call for the independent investigation. So, next speaker will introduce PJ Sorem, who is a sibling of Kai Sorem, one of the 19 massacred in the Toboso killings. They are a member of Gabriela Seattle, a National Democratic Filipino women's and LGBTQ organization fighting for genuine women's liberation and to end gender-based violence. PJ uses they them pronouns.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for the intro. I'm grateful to Representative Jayapal for recognizing the corruption in which the Negros 19 massacre occurred and understanding that a hasty and impartial investigation is the only possible way to start to seek accountability for our families. The very nature of Kai's murder was unjust. I think of my sister, who had no clothes on her, wrapped in nothing but a sheet when we identified her body. Her humanity was stripped from her along with her clothes and taken by the armed forces of the Philippines. I think of the faces of Errol Wendel's family members. Errol's family was given the wrong victim's body, and to this day, they have yet to recover their loved one. I hear the sobs of mothers, family members, and loved ones. These violations of basic human dignity are unthinkable to many Americans, but in the Philippines, it is all too common an occurrence. International pressure of the Philippine state is a crucial part of the call for justice. This violence continues to occur. The Negros 19 massacre was not an independent incident, but one example of many human rights violations. The Philippines will continue to fabricate lies to justify the extrajudicial killings and disappearances of activists. It is up to all of us to do our part to expose the corruption and injustices carried out by the Philippine state. The love I have for my sister empowers me to continue to fight. It is in the interest of the Philippine government that we stay silent, but I refuse to stay silent while the armed forces of the Philippines dehumanizes my sister. I know who she was. Kai was gentle, soft-spoken, and determined. She was always helping others, from jumping a car at 3 in the morning to giving coworkers rides to work to teaching others cultural songs. She was my emergency contact, a shoulder to cry on, and truly my best friend. I see her now. In every moment, I find happiness through this grief. The quiet strength that she had in life moves me to speak loudly about the injustices of her death. Justice for Kai and the Negros 19 is not a simple answer or one solution. Justice is answers and closure for families through the impartial investigation called for in Representative Jayapal's letter. Justice is also fighting to end state-sanctioned violence and U.S. military funding of the AFP. Justice is recognizing the exploitation of peasant farmers in Negros Island and across the Philippines and defending their right to life and livelihood. It is to build a better future where our communities have genuine access to their basic needs and can live without fear of violence. This is the justice that my sister deserves. Thank you.
Thank you, PJ. Thank you for continuing to honor Kai and refusing to stay silent and calling for justice. Next, we would like to introduce Lily Prijoles, sister of Lyle, who will be speaking on behalf of the family.
Good morning, everybody. The end of March of this year, I was meeting up with my brother, Lyle, for our usual chat before he left for the Philippines. It was our ritual check in, reminding him to call me when he was in trouble on his trip. Lyle always came back home. So when we spoke about things we had to do when he returned, it was things like visit mom more, the upcoming birthdays, the future family planning. This was the last time I would see my brother. My baby brother did not come back. Lyle Prijoles is a remarkable baby of our family. He was the pleasant surprise that came after our dad retired from the Navy. He was the baby of our family and the baby of the grandchildren. And although he was the youngest, he always felt older. He was humble and observant. He was the peacemaker, the joke teller, the tension diffuser. Always helpful, always caring for the family, always a dutiful son. He barely gave our parents any problems, even as a latchkey kid to two very busy restaurant owners. As Lyle grew older, he got more involved in the community work. He wanted to use his voice for the good of the people. He had so much love for his community, stretching all the way to the Philippines from where our parents came from. He loved being Filipino and he loved the Philippines so much, he wanted to make it better. The more he educated himself about the Philippines, the more he wanted to do more than just complain about the corruption or ignore a country so many miles away. He turned his love into action to make a difference. He wasn't just going to throw money at a problem or throw his weight around as a philam. He wanted to do the work. When he was going to the Philippines, he wasn't just going on vacation, he was going home and he was going to work. This was a home he didn't grow up in, but he felt so close to. When Lyle was murdered, it devastated more than just our family. It affected so many more people we couldn't even imagine. Our mom was so touched by the outpouring of love for Lyle across the country and the world. She didn't exactly know the details of the heartbreaking work he had to do. He didn't want to burden us with the heaviness of his work. He knew, but we knew it was to help people. He always sacrificed his time, his heart, and himself to help people. That's all he ever wanted to do. How did his human rights work end up like this? And what was the excuse of the Philippine military? Shooting at civilians? Where was their apology? There were only accusations of he was manipulated, he was being enticed, he was tricked, and he wasn't supposed to be there. He should have known better. Lyle knew. He knew what he was doing, that he was doing his job. He knew what was happening in Negros. He was helping people. And it's very disappointing to hear how the government in the Philippines and here in the US have portrayed the Negros 19. It's frustrating to hear the accusations and the lies. Our family has come to terms that we will never get the type of justice found with a jury and a judge or even jail time. And we've come to understand that we may not even get an apology. We want the country we grew up in to care that our siblings, Lyle and Kai, were murdered in the Philippines and that the US government can show some compassion for what we had to experience. What our family demands is an independent investigation into the massacre. We want to be able to investigate all unmanipulated evidence for the victims of Toboso, for the families to be made whole. My brother's trip should not have ended like this. The Philippine Army should not be shooting at civilians and hiding their mistakes. The justice, we call for justice for the Negros 19. We call for justice for the CNH workers in Crockett. My name is Lily Prijoles, Lyle's proud big sister and his best friend. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lily, for continuing to honor Lyle and sharing who he really was and the work that he was doing for Filipinos, for the Philippine country, and for continuing to call for justice for the Negros 19. I just want to share to remind folks too, if you have any questions for the speakers, please direct message the questions person. Our next speaker is Angelo Carlo Guillen, or Attorney AK, a Filipino lawyer whose work focuses on domestic and international human rights and humanitarian law. He deals with cases of rights violations in context of counterinsurgency, counterterrorism, and shrinking civic space, and carries out the on-the-ground investigation and advocacy work for marginalized sectors and communities. Attorney AK serves as a National Union People's Lawyer, Vice President for the Visayas region, as well as the Secretary General for its chapter of Panay Island.
Thank you very much for inviting me. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude for everyone who has been involved in making it possible to secure the the support of the members of the U.S. Congress in drafting and writing and sending the letter to the Philippine government. We are very much grateful for the efforts of all human rights workers in the US in launching and continuing this campaign for justice for the victims of the Tuboso Massacre, especially the members of Malaya and iChirp and all our partners there. The pressure on the Philippine government is made possible only through the work that you do. We are, of course, equally grateful to those members of the US Congress who wrote and signed the letter pushing for an independent investigation into the Poso killings. The influence of US officials on the Philippine government cannot be underestimated. As everyone knows, the United States is the principal of the Philippine government, and Philippine counterinsurgency is based on, it is developed, it is funded, and it is armed by the US government. You may be aware as well that joint exercises between the US and the Philippine Armed Forces have grown significantly over the years, and the two countries have engaged in thousands of bilateral military exercises since 2015, with the largest taking part, of course, or happening during the Balikatan exercises. And the Philippine counterinsurgency, as I said, is funded and armed by the Philippine government. The Philippines is the largest recipient of U.S. military assistance in the Indo-Pacific, with more than $1 billion in financial support and in direct military sales to the Philippines. Now, the Tuboso killings highlights the characteristics of Philippine counterinsurgency that the U.S. funds and supports. Philippine counterinsurgency involves the targeting and killing of civilians. They do not simply involve the engagement of armed groups. The targeting and killing of civilians is both systematic and widespread. And when I speak of civilians, I'm talking not just of individuals who are suspected of having connections with insurgents, but of entire communities, such as those in Negros, that have been militarized under the Philippines counterinsurgency program. Now, Negros is a particular target because there is a vibrant social movement for agrarian reform in that area. And that is something that we always have to take into account when studying Philippine counterinsurgency and why civilians and civilian communities are being targeted. We have to understand the social context of the insurgency. And Negros has faced significant troop deployments since 2018 under Memorandum 32 issued by then President Duterte. And this has resulted in numerous massacres in Negros Island. So you have the Gihulngan massacre in December of 2018. You have the Negros 14 massacre in March of 2019. And you have the Himamay land massacre in June of 2023. And these massacres were perpetrated by the same units under the 3rd Infantry Division of the Philippine Army that was also involved in the Toboso massacre. And it's not just the killings, as I said, that is the hallmark of counterinsurgency, but also the militarization of communities that has been institutionalized under the whole of nation approach under Executive Order number 70 that was issued also under President Duterte. And that is why we are advocating for an independent investigation. It is not something that is merely desirable, but that it is something absolutely necessary because any investigation that is currently being conducted by the Philippine government is being spearheaded by the Philippine National Police, the Security Services, the Justice Department, and these are the very same agencies that are leading the Philippine counterinsurgency campaign. And these are the same units that are also involved in many of these massacres, including the Toboso killing. So we really cannot expect a fair and independent and thorough investigation from these agencies. We do have a Commission on Human Rights that is also conducting an independent investigation. However, the Philippine Commission on Human Rights is riddled by numerous institutional problems such as the lack of funding and, most importantly, the lack of authority to file cases in court. And that is why there are no cases that have been filed against perpetrators of the numerous massacres that took place in Negros. And we are afraid that this will be the same predicament that will face any investigation concerning the Tulboso killings. It is important that the different non-government organizations, civil society organizations, and people's organizations that are currently calling for an independent investigation be involved in any such investigation. And they must continue to advocate and to demand for that, because if you leave it to the Philippine government to carry out its so-called investigations into these human rights violations, then we will simply be presented with a finding that says that the armed forces of the Philippines did not commit any of the violations that have been documented by human rights groups. So thank you so much for continuing this campaign, and I hope that in the months, the years to come, we will continue to have your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney AK, for highlighting the history of uh, the operations in Negros and in the Philippines, and really pointing out how this isn't a one-off incident, but that we need to continue pushing forward to make sure this doesn't happen again. So thank you again. Next, I'll be sharing a statement from the RFK Human Rights Center commending our congressional representatives for the letter and raising the demand for an investigation. Last June, the center awarded the National Union of People's Lawyers the 2026 RFK Human Rights Award, an international prize honoring champions of social justice who stand up to oppression and the nonviolent pursuit of human rights. For this award, the center brought NUPL to Washington, D.C., where they also had a congressional meeting with Congresswoman Jayapal. So the letter reads, the Robert and Ethel Kennedy Human Rights Center commends Congresswoman Jayapal and 10 other members of Congress for calling for an independent investigation into the Philippine Army's killing of 19 people in Taboso, Negros Occidental Province in April. Despite the Army's claim that all 19 people were combatants, credible reports show that up to 9 of those killed were civilians, including 2 U.S. citizen activists, Sorem and Lyle Prijoles, as well as a journalist, a university student, and 2 land rights activists. We echo the concerns raised in the congressional letter and by human rights organizations that systemic barriers pose a serious risk to the current investigation into the killings by the Philippines Commission on Human Rights. Security forces have a track record of failing to cooperate with Commission's investigations, including by routinely refusing to turn over key evidence and documents, and they usually accompany Commission investigators to affected communities to conduct interviews. Immediately following the killings in Taboso, independent investigators were denied access to the scene, but subsequent reports of an independent forensic pathologist and a civil society fact-finding mission found clear discrepancies with the Army's official account. We are deeply concerned that such barriers may prevent the Commission from making credible findings regarding any crimes or violations of human rights or humanitarian law committed by the Army. Victims and their families deserve justice and the truth about what occurred. It is imperative that the Philippine government ensure an independent, impartial, and credible investigation into the Taboso killings, including the full cooperation of the Army as the first steps towards accountability.
Thank you, Troy, for reading the statement. We'll go into our next speaker, who is Reverend Sadie Stone, is a United Methodist pastor in San Francisco, California. She currently serves as pastor of Jones Memorial UMC in San Francisco. Alongside her pastoral work, she is a recent law school graduate from the University of San Francisco School of Law and a member of the Global Council of the International Coalition for Human Rights in the Philippines.
Thank you and good morning. My name is Reverend Sadie Stone, and I also want to reiterate my thanks to Congresswoman Jayapal and the 10 other members of Congress who signed her letter for the independent, impartial, and credible investigation into the killings of the 19 people in Toboso Negros Occidental. Among them, as we have mentioned, the 2 American citizens, Sorem of Seattle and Lyle Prijoles of Hayward, California. Lyle was my friend for more than a decade. I'm also here to share with you what happened when I tried to help investigate their deaths. On May 12th, I flew to Manila to join an international fact-finding mission on the Negros 19 killings, but I never made it past the airport. I was pulled aside at immigration, questioned about my human rights work, denied entry into the country, and told that I am now blacklisted from the Philippines. I'm a pastor. I'm a recent law school graduate. I carry a Bible and a passport, not a weapon. And I was turned around at the border and sent home before I could ask a single question. I don't raise my blacklisting because it matters more next or even compares to the lives that were lost. I raise it because barring me is the same reflex that keeps witnesses from the truth in Negros. The sealing of a crime scene, the stonewalling of a human rights commission, a pastor turned away at an airport. A government that's confident in truth does not need to do any of that. You shut out witnesses when you are afraid of what they will find. And what happened to me and what happened in Negros are part of the same policy. For more than 50 years, the Philippine government has waged what it calls counterinsurgency, a military campaign against a rural rebellion. But over time, it has stopped distinguishing between armed fighters and unarmed civilians. And its central tactic today is called red tagging. The government publicly brands activists, journalists, students, farm organizers, lawyers, church workers as communists and terrorist fronts. And red tagging is not just name calling, it's a trigger. Once you are named, that label is used to justify surveillance and frozen bank accounts, arrest, and again killing, as Attorney AK has reiterated, which has plagued the island of Negros. This is the thread that runs through everything we are here to discuss. Lyle and Kai and others advocated for the rural Filipino communities in Negros. And in the wake of their deaths, they have been red tagged as a means to justify their killing. I do this same work and so do countless others, but I was stopped at the border. This label comes to justify the human rights abuses. And the evidence that the Negros 19 was no simple firefight is already mounting. Eyewitnesses, independent forensic pathologists, colleagues of those who were killed have all contradicted the Army's claim that all of them were combatants. And the ambassador, the man defending this in Washington, is the very man that the Congresswoman's letter is addressed to. Jayapal addressed the letter to Ambassador Romualdez. And the ambassador has written in his own words that part of his job here in the United States and in Washington, D.C., is to explain away the red tagging and the human rights concern that American legislators raise. So that when Congress asks about extrajudicial killings, his role is to tell them that there is nothing to see, that it doesn't exist. The same government that red tagged Lyle and Kai, RJ, Errol, Maureen, Alyssa, and countless others sends an ambassador to sit in Washington to make sure that no one here believes it. That same machinery is now also being built here in Washington, D.C. and in the United States. 2 weeks ago, on July 16th, our own Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, convened officials from 66 countries at the State Department for a summit on what the administration calls far-left terrorism. This was not just talk. That same day, the State Department issued a new visa restriction policy targeting people it deems aligned with so-called far-left groups. And officials have been openly exploring using foreign terrorism designations to unlock surveillance of American citizens. A foreign terrorism label is the American version of red tagging. It turns a political category into a weapon of surveillance and prosecution. And this administration has told us it will not be slowed by our objections. At the summit, a senior official said that when people invoke their civil liberties, that appeal is disingenuous and must fall on deaf ears. Our most basic protections are being dismissed from this podium of our own State Department as some sort of trick. I am a pastor, and I am part of a solidarity organization that cares about human rights abuses. I stand at a pulpit every week preaching justice. Under the logic on display at the summit, every one of those things can be recast as a support for terrorism. I have already been blacklisted by one government for this work. And by the standard that they're facing, feeding the hungry can make you subversive. Defending a farmer makes you a front. Documenting the truth makes you a terrorist. There is no limit to a test like that. It swept up Sorem, who was 26, and Lyle Prijoles, who gave his life to the rural communities. They were not enemies of any state. They were human rights advocates, and the labeling is what puts targets on their backs and the backs of so many others. So we ask what Congresswoman Jayapal asks, for an independent, impartial, credible investigation, free from interference by the forces under investigation, and an inquiry into whether American assistance played a role. And we ask our own government to stop building the machinery here at home that we are asking the Philippines to answer for. 19 families are waiting for the truth. 2 of them are here in this country. And the labels will not comfort them, only the truth will. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Sadie, for your statement. I was in the Philippines participating in the initial fact-finding mission that Reverend Sadie was on the way to before being blacklisted. Just appreciate your continued work. After the Reverend was blacklisted, we continued to face surveillance and other counterintelligence tactics as well. Individuals following our caravan, taking photographs of us. We learned that the Philippine military told those we were interviewing a day before not to talk to us, and we're intimidated. So everything being highlighted by different speakers today really showed during that mission. So thank you again. I believe we're coming up to our final sharing. So next, before we get into questions, but next I'll be sharing excerpts from the International Longshore and Warehouse Union Local 10 resolution, which recently passed. On June 15, ILWU Local 6 warehouse workers at the C&H refinery in Crockett, California, went on strike to demand sick and overtime pay and health benefits. Filipino organizations joined the strike lines to support the demand for a fair contract. And as they did that, ILWU recognized how C&H was both exploiting workers here in the U.S., as well as exploiting peasants and farmers in the Philippines. And in solidarity, they put forth this resolution. So here are just a few excerpts. Whereas Negros Island is considered the sugar bowl of the Philippines and yields over 2 million metric tons yearly, the sugarcane workers, farmers, and peasants producing sugar in Negros Occidental Philippines face extreme repression and violence by the armed forces of the Philippines under President Marcos Jr.'s command, where 19 people, including 2 Filipino Americans, Lyle Prijoles and Kai Sorem, who were learning about the conditions of sugarcane workers, were recently massacred on April 19, 2026, by the armed forces of the Philippines, and where CNH sources close to 100,000 metric tons of sugar every year. Whereas the Bay Area has direct ties to Negros Island, the Thai Herald that is currently docked at CNH in Crockett, California, has roughly 35,000 tons of sugar that originated from Negros, whereas solidarity between ILWU and the Filipino people fighting against corruption and violent fascist repression has spanned decades. Be it therefore resolved that ILWU Local 10 stands with the Filipino community, condemning the aggressive military massacre under President Marcos Jr.'s command that resulted in 19 fatalities in Negros Occidental Philippines. Be it further resolved that ILWU Local 10 president publish a letter of solidarity condemning the Filipino military, demanding they take appropriate action in this aggressive attack on workers, also sending a copy to the International Executive Board and requesting they do the same. Be it finally resolved that ILWU Local 10 call on its members to support the local Defend Negros Island NorCal coalition on their strike lines and in ways that they need support.
Thank you, Troy. Um, yeah, really inspiring to see ILW Local 10 really supporting and fighting for their rights and on the docks, and also being able to really see the linkage with the Negros Island and then Negros 19, really standing in international solidarity alongside us. We are now going to move into our question and answer. And if you have any questions, again, please send it to the questions person, and we'll present them as we go. So, the first question, why is it why it's important that the connections be drawn between the Negros 19 story and the labor fight by CNH workers? And have this be answered by Sadie.
Yes, thank you. So I think one of the most important things that we can draw from this, and some of the information was just shared by Troy when reading their resolution, is that a lot of the times as we talk about the struggles in the Philippines, and something that I get asked a lot as a white woman is, why do you care about what's happening in the Philippines? Why are you so committed to the human rights work in the Philippines? And it's that because what happens over there actually does impact what happens here in the United States. It's connected. These countries have always been deeply connected, and the Philippines still serves as a neo-colony of the United States. And this struggle at CNH Sugar Company brings the fight of Negros, of why Kai and Lyle and others were there with the farmers in Negros. It brings it to the very front door of those of us who are in the Bay Area. So the CNH Sugar Company, they went on strike in June because they were fighting for better working conditions. The farmers in Negros have been fighting for the ability to have autonomy over their farmland, to get working conditions that allow them to raise a family and have their basic needs met. Those are different struggles. They're one's working on a factory and the other's farming in the Philippines, but they're fighting for similar things. And more than that, the boat that is coming, that is being asked to be unloaded for the sugar to be processed at the sugar company and to be unloaded by the longshore workers, that sugar is coming directly from those farms in Negros, directly from where Kai and Lyle and the others who were killed were at. It's a direct linkage of bringing that struggle directly to the Bay Area. And so it's important for us to show that why they were there, if those the struggles are linked together. And the Negros is called the sugar bowl of the Philippines. It's where most of the sugar, or so much of the sugar of the world, is manufactured. And so, again, it's important for us to show solidarity with those who are working here and bring the link of the struggle of the Negros to the link here. And just to show how international solidarity really is important, that when we fight for the struggles of one, we really are fighting for the struggles of all.
Thank you, Reverend Sadie. We have our next question for Attorney AK. Question is, has there been any word from the Philippine Congress at all?
From Congress as a body, unfortunately, there has been no push for a genuine investigation. There are members of Congress from the progressive bloc who are, of course, advocating for independent investigations. Members or former members of Congress have been involved in the independent fact-finding mission conducted by civil society into the Toboso killings. And it is from their efforts that we were able to secure additional information that actually confirmed the fact that many of the victims were civilians, contradicting the narrative that is being presented by the Philippine Armed Forces, by the Philippine National Police, and simply being adopted by national agencies of the Philippine government. So we hope that through lobbying work and through the activities of people's organizations, we are able to bring greater pressure on different agencies of government, including the Philippine Congress, in order to at least advocate for independent investigations. But of course, we have to be realistic. Despite the fact that there have been dozens of killings that have taken place in Negros, both under the current administration, under Ferdinand Marcos Jr., and under the previous administration, the Philippine Congress has been silent. And in that way, it has also been complicit in many of these human rights violations. There is hardly any critical voice from Congress as an institution, whether in the lower house or in the Senate. And we don't expect that situation to change unless there is sufficient pressure from civil society. And that is where our organizations come in. We have to show both the Philippine government and the US government that it is in our interest that we continue this campaign.
Thank you, Attorney AK. So the next question is towards the families. Aside from the congressional letter, has the U.S. government provided any support in seeking justice and accountability for Kai and Lyle, given they are U.S. citizens?
For us, nothing that we are aware. We heard anything our mom or to Lyle's wife. So on our end, nothing. PJ?
Yeah, pretty similar. The US government itself has really not offered any support. While we were in the Philippines, we were contacted by the US Embassy in Manila. Um, but it was really the work of these different people's organizations that helped us, and not the work of the US government or the embassy. They actually spelled our last name wrong in contacting us, so that just shows, the lack of care that they had for our family.
Thank, thank you, PJ and Lily. Oh, Lily, did you want to say anything else? I saw you on mute.
Uh,
Okay.
no, I was agreeing with PJ.
Okay.
Nothing. Yeah, nothing on our end.
Okay. Thank you. And a question for, I think, just for the panel of speakers. What have we learned from the past targeted shooting of Brandon Lee, a San Francisco resident, about the role local government officials in the Bay Area or US can play in pushing for justice? Yeah, anyone who is able to share.
So I'm part of the Justice for Brandon Lee Coalition, and we have continued to fight for justice for Brandon Lee. For those who don't know, Brandon is another U.S. citizen who moved to the Philippines and lived there for almost a decade, was red tagged, targeted, and there was an assassination attempt on his life. And he is now back in the Bay Area and is a quadriplegic as a result of that attack by the military in the Philippines. And this happened in 2019. So for the last 7 years, we've been advocating again with our representatives here to tell Brandon's story and to fight for justice, not only for Brandon, but for others who have been red tagged, who have been victims of, of violence and attacks in the Philippines. And it's an upward battle for sure. And one of the biggest ways that we are trying to do that is through the I'm sorry, I'm so tired. I took the bar exam yesterday. Is through the act that we're trying to pass. Somebody help me, please. What the in the one we're trying to pass in legislation?
Oh, the PHRA?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah,
The PHRA. Is the
Philippine yeah.
PHRA. Yeah, drawing connections between the way that we are funding the military in the Philippines the and the way that that direct support of the Philippines continues to contribute to the human rights violations there. And so the lesson is that we have to keep pushing because it only comes as a drive from the people. If we don't continue to push for the legislators to care, if we don't keep this at the attention, so it's really our work. It's the work of all of us who are here. It's the work of the organizations, and especially as we saw with that summit that Marco Rubio held, it's going to become even more important that we continue to raise the alarm of how human rights organizations have an important role to play in making sure that justice happens not only for American citizens, but for all people who are victims of human rights violations, especially as those human rights violations have been contributed by military funding from the United States. So it's an upward battle. It's a slow battle. We know that our government does not move quickly on anything. And so I would advocate for everybody. If you are here, you're not part of an organization. If you haven't learned about the Philippine Human Rights Act, thank you for sticking with me as my brain completely forgot what that term was. To learn more about it and find out ways that you can help and support.
Yeah, thank you. So, next question is given the history of killings, why do the organizations keep sending young Americans to Negros? Coming from Blake Sorem, father of Kai. I'd like to ask AK this question.
I'd like to think that different organizations, people's organizations, and individuals have their own reasons for going to conflict areas and getting involved in mass movements and social movements in trying to understand the root causes of conflict. If we want to put an end to violence, put an end to armed conflicts in different places, we need to understand the root causes and the social context in which these conflicts take place. And I do believe that this was the reason that Kai and Lyle were in the Philippines. The people who met them, who were interviewed by the fact-finding mission, spoke of how the victims were killed in Toboso were engaging in activities that are intended to shed light on the conditions of poor farmers in Negros. And that is important because what the government is trying to do, both the Philippine government and unfortunately the US government, is try to depoliticize the violence that is taking place in Negros, try to remove the context, and simply paint all of the insurgents, individuals who share dissident views, individuals who are critical of the Philippine government, try to paint all of them as terrorists or terrorist organizations. And that is precisely the approach that facilitates targeting of civilians and civilian communities by refusing to discuss the root causes of conflict and the context in which these conflicts take place. You are ensuring that exploitation and oppression continue to proliferate. And the only way to address that, the only way to counter that is by going to these places and experiencing the lives and learning about the lives of marginalized groups. And in my opinion, that is just as important as documenting human rights violations. Otherwise, if we simply write reports and publish them online without actually sharing the experiences of marginalized groups, the victims, the people we talk about, would be doing little to actually change their lives and to improve the situation. And that is not, in my opinion, really human rights work. Human rights advocacy should always include an effort to actually improve um, or to address social inequities and injustice. And I think having to be on the ground is an integral part of engaging in human rights work.
Can I can I also say something on behalf
Oh,
of
yes, of
sorry,
course.
to answer the question? One, the government shouldn't be, it shouldn't, the killing shouldn't be happening by way of the Philippine military. If you go to Negros, you should be safe, or you should feel safe. Um, in the military, the government shouldn't be attacking you. I think, not speaking for Lyle, but how I know Lyle is, even he wasn't getting sent there. He probably would have just tried to find a way to go by himself. And at least there's an organization that will kind of facilitate his trip there. They're guiding him there. So he's not running around the Philippines like trying to find, answers. There's a way to kind of like be organized about it. I think that with the way Lyle is, it wouldn't have been, um, if it wasn't for his human rights reporting, if he would have done it as a journalist, he would have done it as a medical worker. He would have found a way to just go there because he knew that people were in trouble. What he knows about the area, he would have wanted to help no matter what. He wasn't being sent. He wasn't being told to go. He wanted to go, and going through Chirp was just, it was just an avenue to go where he would know where he was going. He would have people there to communicate with or to talk to. Um, and then they would point him in the correct direction instead of just him running willy nilly all over the Philippines, just trying to I need to help people. And at least this was giving him a direction, I think. Um, I think just knowing Lyle, he would have found a way to help in any way that he could. Um, and this was one of the ways he could. Um, he would have done it in any occupation he would have had. He would have just tried to find a way to do it, no matter what. I think it's kind of like a dark way of thinking about it, but it's just the way his heart was. It's just he wanted to do something, and if he was going to sacrifice himself, he would only think about other people. It's heartbreaking, but it's just the kind of person he was. You know, and I have to come to terms with that fact that he, he would have done this on behalf, helping. So, um, there's a history of killing in a lot of places in the Philippines. And for the most part, like, you know, I feel safe in a lot of places in the Philippines. Um, or just, you just don't go to the Philippines at all. Like, you just stay home if you're just not gonna try or check, you know. Um, yeah, but that's how I know Lyle. It's just he would have found a way, anyways, no matter what.
Thank you, Attorney AK and Lily. We are coming up to time. So, to wrap up, we just wanted to ask if there's any closing words or statements from um, uh, for any of the speakers, and if not, that's okay. We'll go right into the just move into calls for actions and next steps. So thank you everyone for joining today. Please do continue following along. Some concrete action steps are following up here at Philippine Human Rights Act at gmail.com for any interviews or questions. Staying updated on the campaign for justice for the Negros 19. These are the various organizations that are helping push this forward. U.S, Kabataan Alliance, Malaya Movement, Defend Negros NorCal, Defend Negros Washington. And lastly, engage your legislators to demand for an independent investigation. We do have an online toolkit that can be referenced to help carry this out, linked here in this tiny URL. So again, please do follow up with any more questions. Thank you so much to our speakers today. And we will continue pushing for justice for the Negros 19 and to defend Negros.